Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Welcome, friends, family in Christ. Thank you so much for tuning in, your support and your prayers. We appreciate you guys. Another important topic today, we're going back to the subject of media, and there's just so much work to be done in this country when it comes to fighting the lies, deception, and bias of most media outlets. And I'm not exaggerating. So we've been at this for many, many decades trying to raise awareness, and there's some great organizations. And one today I want to point you back to. And if you're not following the Media Research Center, please do. It's mrc.org, mrc.org. And I want to point you to newsbusters.org, another offshoot of the Media Research Center. And Nicholas Fondacaro, he's back with us. He works for the Newsbusters arm of Media Research Center. Thank you so much for all you do, brother. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too again, David.
Yeah, a lot of fun things to talk about. Fun, I say jokingly, because it does get people angry because because of the bias and the leftist control of practically every, the big tech, media, news, education in our country. It just doesn't seem like people are getting the truth. Some are, but that wouldn't be the majority. So we're thankful for what you do, but a lot of people would just really want to hear more about what you guys are doing. So I know this is not an article that you wrote. We're going to get to a few that you put out, and I love talking about The View. And man, I hope they lose their status. They are not a bona fide news program. That's a joke. But anyway, we'll get to that. Let's talk about what is on people's radar recently, and that's the bad doctor, Anthony Fauci. And because of his pardon, it just doesn't seem like there's going to be an injustice. But just recently, the Senate voted 8-5 to hold him in contempt. Can you tell us more about that and where you think this might go?
Yeah, so hopefully the DOJ will move on this so the American people can at least get some sort of justice, some sort of accountability from him, especially with what's coming out through the diary and stuff like this. But it almost seems like possibly because of, as you mentioned, the pardon, it might be more of like an Al Capone situation where they'll get him on something else and all of the major crimes will just sort of still out there, but get, like with Al Capone, get him on tax evasion. With this, it's more of like a contempt of Congress. And honestly, it seems to be like this one can really stick. Like when you're pleading the fifth, it needs to be about stuff that could possibly incriminate you. But he was pleading the fifth to stuff that like what color's the carpet, like what's your name, like all this other stuff that he basically cannot plead the fifth for.
So let's go to the article over at Newsbusters, how the elitist media and news apps rushed to Fauci's defense. Before we just kind of mention a few points from the article and anything else you want to bring out, Nick, why do you think it is? Do you think the left just feels like they're obligated to protect him no matter what? Do you think they're all still believing that during COVID, everything that was put out by Fauci and the government was, the masks, social distancing, the vaccines, which now we're learning so much about the injuries and deaths? Do they still have to double down and defend him? I guess apparently they do. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think that they have to double down and defend him because they hitched their wagon to him during all of this, right? He became the face of obviously the briefings and stuff like that, but he became through them. He became the sort of like the counter to Trump. When Trump would do the press briefings and say something, they would all run to him to get the counter, make him be the face of the science and like I am the science and all that. And basically they made him like their counterpoint to Trump and the people who were asking legitimate questions about the quote unquote science, about like social distancing, keeping kids out of schools. And now they have to, because they hitched their credibility to him, they now have to step in and sort of pretend that everything that he was preaching during this time and recommending was 100% correct way to go, even though a lot of them now, you'll have occasionally an admittance of like, oh yeah, we probably shouldn't have kept the schools closed. An admittance that because the schools were closed, you had kids lose retention and like harm their social development. And not to mention all the economic damage that was done with this. And so now they have to, because their reputations were hitched to this, they have to defend him. And a point that I sort of saw during all of this, right, is when you have a secular media, they have to find a savior in a fallible, prideful man. And that was who they connected their wagon to.
Wow, you're exactly right. They've got to find a savior. Man, they just supported him no matter what. And some of them were probably going, oh, I can't believe he said that, but I got to support him. So let's go to this article. It says the big three networks and news apps largely ignored bombshell revelations from his pandemic era diaries that were released by Senator Rand Paul, and a media research center analysis of the coverage. We're not surprised. Those who have been paying attention and are informed, which is not by any stretch the majority of Americans or citizens, but we understand, but we're still frustrated by it. ABC, Apple News, CBS, Google News, MSN, and NBC found very little in terms of illuminating diary details, which included Fauci's recommendations that destroyed the lives of millions, and we could go on. It's just a travesty. So, Nick, talk about this analysis and how out of whack it is, out of balance, unfortunately.
Yeah, so basically you had Senator Rand Paul drop the diary on Saturday night, basically, or it was either Friday night or Saturday, like basically give people enough time to go through it a few days ahead of the hearing to get a preview of sort of like the hard-hitting things that he was going to get asked ahead of time. And basically just the media, even though this was out there and it was blowing up on social media, you had like some of the media folks sort of rushing to his defense on X, on Blue Sky, and all these different, and Instagram, all these different social media apps. But when it came to their morning and evening newscasts, like on ABC, CBS, NBC, they didn't want to touch it at all. So you basically had them ignoring it basically until the hearing happened. And then suddenly this hearing that just happened to pop up out of nowhere, barely giving even a run up to it. So for their viewers who may just only get home and watch ABC nightly news when they're eating dinner, they were basically blindsided by this until the hearing happened. And then once it happened, they covered it for a combined like 27 minutes, and I believe it's but basically a combined 27 minutes. And essentially they just only covered it after the hearing happened. And even then it was, oh, Republicans are pouncing on him, they're attacking him, they're needling him, basically doing it as like him facing down the lions in the arena of like the Republicans trying to maul him through rancor and discourse.
So I want to quote Media Research Center President David Bozell, who's quoted in this article. The Fauci diaries should have been one of the biggest stories of the year. Instead of investigating what the diaries revealed, the elitist media and the news apps went into full-blown protection mode, and they downplayed the bombshell disclosures. Nick, I'm sure they would have done the same if that was Trump's diaries, right?
Oh, absolutely not. These were the same people who were like sort of salivating when his financial disclosures were leaked from the IRS to the New York Times, and they were quick to publish basically his private materials. This was Fauci's public materials, basically because they were owned by the federal government. These notes were basically kept on his government-issued devices, his computer. And now I think we're about to get a bit more of those from him, because apparently I saw some reports that the committee now has the government-issue iPhone that he was given. So we're probably going to get some more messages that were being sent, like the exact messages that were being sent between him and a lot of these media folks who, for instance, you had Jake Tapper, who Fauci in his diary was admitting that he was feeding him questions to be hostile to another member of, I believe, one of the other members of the Joint Task Force, who they were apparently butting heads behind the scenes, and he was feeding Fauci this hostile line of attack so that way he can be grilled on it in public.
Wow. So corrupt. And I just want to wrap this up before we get to a couple of your articles, Nick, at Newsbusters, by saying, World News Tonight and Good Morning America boasted of Fauci as the man millions of Americans turned to for answers during the COVID pandemic. And now they're saying, well, now he's being needled by Republicans, even though he served in government for 54 years and has testified. Even GMA co-host George Snuffleupagus, who, put in his 2 cents, he's been a political hack for way too many years. And he said, it's just a signs of the times that a hearing could be as partisan as it gets. Well, they're pointing the finger, but they're not looking at themselves and how they report on any Republican in politics, or especially Trump.
Oh, exactly. This is from the guy who ended up getting ABC sued for defamation, and then the network had to settle it because of him and his big mouth saying nasty stuff about Trump being found guilty of rape and all that stuff. So this is the guy who also was a Bill Clinton a White House aide, and he with all of those hearings and stuff like that. So basically, it's really rich for Stephanopoulos to sort of mention this. And I should also note about the news apps. Basically, you had Apple News, Google News, and MSN. They had to write basically immediately in the hour or so after the hearing happened. They only had about 10 stories on the hearing, so they kind of kept the hearing tamped down. There was one Fox News citation that they were pushing. I believe it was Google News was pushing to its readers. But then after about an hour after the hearing, it actually dropped to the very bottom of the list where people could barely find it. So this is sort of how even the critical stories that are going out there, they'll put them out there for a little bit so organizations like Newsbusters and the Media Research Center can be like, oh, look, there is a story about it. And then once we put out an initial report about the coverage, they can just pull that down and then they're back to business as usual. But we're onto them and we're able to find it when they move it.
That's the game. That's the game, friends. People, I think Americans no longer remember the principles of journalism from back in the day. And it's just such a disappointment. I mean, that's a lack of a better word, but let's go to one of your articles here. It's going by quickly today. We love talking about The View. And by the way, over on your Facebook page at Media Research Center, I want to quote the theologian Joy Behar, who said, you're not voting for Republicans, you're voting for a cult. Now, she said that a couple of years ago, but I mean, just the fact that they actually think they're a news show, The View, the liberal, leftist, Democrat, socialist View, they don't share views, plural. I mean, just look at the guests. You've done a lot of stories on this, Nick. In this case, it's the liberal echo chamber, ABC's The View. The number of conservative guests swells to 5 compared to 87 liberals. Go ahead and walk us through this for people that maybe have not been paying attention to just how out of balance this is.
Yeah, so basically they had 87 Democrat guests that had expressed a liberal opinion when politics had come up during the course of a conversation with the guests. 16 of those were Democratic politicians. The rest of them were there were also 2 Supreme Court justices, Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson. So basically 2 of the 3 liberal Supreme Court justices. I believe they were both pushing children's books, and basically. Then for the Republican side or the conservative side, you had somebody who isn't really a conservative. It was actress Cheryl Hines, who, because her husband is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., they basically used her as a punching bag in lieu of having her husband on the show. So basically, she was defending her husband and Trump's policies with Make America Healthy Again. So she essentially became conservative because she was defending her husband's politics and thus Trump's politics. Then you had MTG, who was on 3 times, but only one of her appearances were counted as conservative. That was before she sort of made her switch to attacking Trump and Republicans. They basically had her on so she can attack Republicans. And 2 of the 3 times they were actually trying to court her to become a Democrat for them. And then you had Spencer Pratt, and then J.D. Vance was the most high-profile Republican that they had on the show.
So just putting up this graphic, 87 to 5, and I like the word you said is swelled to 5 conservative guests. Let me quote the MRC president, David Bozell, again, he said the guest ratio proves the show is not diverse at all. It's a Democrat Socialist Party infomercial. And friends, every show is. I don't watch it. I hope and pray if you're Christian, conservative, patriotic, Republican, I mean, maybe you want to watch it so you have ammo, but don't waste your time. I hope you're not supporting or watching The View. But so what's going to happen? There's, I think I read sometime there's something coming up in the next couple of weeks. There's a decision, was it by the FCC? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so there's a decision from the FCC coming up in the next few weeks. There's some rumors that some other publications have sort of put out there about that. It seems like they're going to be possibly ruling against The View. But basically, and we put in us here at the MRC and Newsbusters, we put in as a part of public comment. I believe it was over 2,000 pieces of evidence, basically, to show the FCC, hey, here are instances where The View was essentially breaking ABC's license and basically showing that this is not a news program because they are engaging in electioneering, where they have openly told their viewers to go vote for Democrats if you want accountability for Trump and Republicans. Numerous instances, basically, like as we've been getting closer to the midterms, they have ramped up their electioneering before they went on their summer hiatus. And that's one of the biggest violations. And then we show how, hey, they're engaging in disinformation, where they're literally just making up information like the Holocaust not being about race, or claiming Trump and Republicans get rich off of mass shootings. Or claiming that Trump is going to outlaw, and essentially part of their electioneering is misinformation as well, where leading up to the last presidential election, you had Whoopi claiming that Trump was running on a position on a policy platform of breaking up interracial marriages, deporting the minority, and then redistributing the white spouse to somebody else. So, and then basically showing, hey, this show has also justified or promoted political violence, because you had Sonny Hostin saying that Democrats needed to be willing to fight and die for their rights. And then some of their other stuff where like they're sort of like playing footsie with the Luigi Mangione and sort of publicly refusing to tone down their rhetoric after the first two assassination attempts against Trump.
So before I want to touch on another article you wrote. The MRC strikes back at ABC Disney, pushes for denial of license renewals. That's one that I want to touch on. But talk to us about all the leftist organizations. You say a letter of support was signed by a slew of leftist organizations and delivered to Disney. I mean, we should just look at who supports them and kind of understand how this battle is how so divisive.
Yeah, so basically, part of the commenting system with the FCC is any organization, they can put in their 2 cents, file a legal brief, point to any sort of like legal arguments and stuff like that. Basically, you had a whole bunch of organizations sign on to a letter. That each individual one is escaping me at the moment. But basically, they all sort of signed on to a letter saying that, oh, this is a violation of ABC and Disney's First Amendment rights. This is an example of the FCC doing Trump's bidding and being retaliatory against the network for criticisms that he's received from like Jimmy Kimmel, The View, other people on the show. But the only problem is they never address, even ABC in their own reply, never address the evidence that we present of this electioneering, of this promotion of disinformation or misinformation, the promotion of and justification of political violence. They just sort of say like, oh, we've made these organizations that are against us have sort of pointed to a few mistakes. They don't amount to anything, even though we have this absolute mountain of evidence of how it is that they conduct their news programs. Yep. And all of it is a violation of their license.
Jeez. Oh my goodness, there's so much. But let's just mention a few of these. Obviously, the ACLU. Oh my goodness, communist organization. What is the national LGBT tech? The Trevor Project. My goodness, what is the National Coalition Against Censorship? That sounds good, but I think they're coming from the wrong side, right?
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of these are places that will say they're nonpartisan or non-biased, but a lot of them are just stepping into defending because they're not addressing any of our arguments, especially the legal argument of essentially ABC is arguing that they have squatters' rights to essentially arguing that they have squatters' rights to the bandwidth that they have been permitted with their licenses, and basically saying these are our airwaves, this band of the spectrum, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's ours, but it's not. It's public. It's the public airwaves, and as part of their license, they had to agree to being fair balance, not pushing, not doing electioneering, not be a platform for one party over another. This isn't necessarily like because they're claiming that this is about like the fairness doctrine, which is not something we're not advocating for. We're basically saying it's like, hey, you guys have become a platform not just about hating Trump, and even though they do a lot of that, it is about promoting one party, being a party media outlet over giving what is in the best public interest, especially when it comes to not covering certain stories. And that's another thing that we cover here at Newsbusters a lot is the stuff that they don't cover when it comes to bias by omission. And that is when they are not acting in the best public interest, but they're acting in the best interest of Democrats in trying to help them get elected.
I'm glad you brought bias by omission. Is very important because this is just as much a battle of what the liberal outlets do not talk about. If it reflects negatively on a Democrat or a socialist or a radical, they're not going to cover that or maybe give it a few minutes as opposed to if it was a negative story on Trump or Republican conservative. Let's talk about this. Explain, you mentioned the fairness doctrine. I don't want to skim over that because we heard the battle about that several years ago. And could you explain it? Again, it sounds good, the fairness doctrine, but please explain a little bit more about that, why that's important.
Yeah, so a lot of that basically has to do with is making sure that you have, it sometimes is tied to equal time, which that's its own thing, but that has to do with a program that is not a news related. So basically Jimmy Kimmel, for instance, would fall under equal time. And that's some of the arguments that we're arguing for The View, that they are not a news program. So it is not just that they are covering stuff that just happens to be politics and they wouldn't have to show equal time, but it's this doctrine of you need to manipulate your programming in a way that is beneficial, but it's not implying that they need to show that they need to also become a platform for Republicans. It's basically just saying, hey, you guys need to cover this fairly. You're not supposed to cover one side as becoming, like I mentioned, essentially become a Democratic media outlet and be their basically publicity arm like ABC has become. And this is why we're trying to get the FCC to be like, hey, there are 8 ABC-owned affiliates that their licenses are up for early renewal that you guys have put forward here, and you guys should not be essentially renewing those licenses because they are breaking their vow to the American people when they agreed to their license.
I know they are breaking their vow, breaking the rules, going against what they're supposed to be doing. Ultimately, Nick, I mean, this is speculation. Do you think it's going to matter? And I want to talk a little bit more about how the Media Research Center is striking back, according to your article that just came out, August 5th. But what do you see happening? You've been at this for a long time. Will there be any incremental progress? Will there be a slap on the wrist? How do you see this playing out? If you can speculate for us.
I would be hopeful that, obviously, since we're pushing so hard on this, I'm hopeful that there will be some sort of serious reprimand here, either revoking the licenses outright or trying to get them to be like, hey, here are some ways that you guys need, or at least hold up our evidence to them and force them to answer it. Because when they issued their reply to it, they never actually addressed really any of our arguments to be like, this is the examples of you doing electioneering. How do you explain your bona fide news program, The View, telling people to vote for Democrats? So there needs to be at least some effort to have ABC on the record to address our evidence, or at least the very chance give them an opportunity to correct themselves. I think that might be possibly the most likely outcome, is them giving an opportunity to correct themselves, and then possibly in the future being like, well, you guys didn't reel yourselves in, so now we're going to actually give you guys a good thump and refuse to renew these licenses. I think out of the two different things that are the two different things that are happening simultaneously, I do believe that the View will likely lose their status as bona fide news, and that could actually make a pretty good argument for getting rid of their licenses, because it shows that ABC was not operating in good faith when in 2014, basically, they said that The View was bona fide news. So in this basically 12 years, ABC was not operating in good faith and was breaking their license.
No, what a joke. The View, bona fide news, it is a joke. It's comedy or entertainment or whatever, but it is definitely one-sided. I want to just quote briefly from the article, friends, and you can go to Newsbusters and look it up, how they're pushing for denial of license renewals. The MRC petition documents a repeated pattern of conduct relevant to renewal, including direct partisan electioneering, as Nick mentioned, dissemination of misinformation, and broadcasts minimizing or appearing to justify political violence. This has been a problem way before the Charlie Kirk assassination, way before the assassination attempts on Trump. Just the rhetoric. The rhetoric hasn't changed, even though we've had these assassinations, or attempts anyway. The rhetoric hasn't changed. So, Nick, minute and a half left. It went by fast. What do you have coming up? What else are you writing about, preparing to research and talk about?
Yeah, we're keeping a close eye, obviously, on the ABC aspects of this, and then we're also still waiting for probably your viewers know that I've been covering the defamation cases of Zachary Young, Navy veteran and former CIA officer Zachary Young, against multiple media outlets. We still have an appeal waiting against his appeal against Puck News. Basically waiting to see what the Florida First District Court of Appeals will say about his defamation case against them. It's been out for a bit over a month now, month and a half, I believe. So we're still waiting on that. I think the fact that it's taken this long might show some good signs for him on that one.
So I see you're doing a lot of great work, and over on the main site, mrc.org. Where did I see that there's a challenging match going on? You guys are. Is the fundraiser over, or is it still going on this summer?
I believe the fundraiser might still be going on. I would recommend your viewers go over to newsbusters.org and check it out for themselves, because depending on when the timing is, or like when they see this, it might be over or might still be going on.
All right, newsbusters.org, mrc.org. Man, you guys do some great work. I quote you frequently, and just thank you for keeping us informed, brother. Appreciate your time. We'll do this again, Lord willing.
Yes, thank you again.
All right, friends, thank you so much for sharing. God bless you, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter. See you next time.